Hour 2 Overdrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Bryan Hayes, the O-Dog, Jeff O'Neill, Jamie Noodles, McLennan. A beautiful, beautiful day here in Toronto. Leafs Bruins tonight.
Weather, man. Golf weather.
It really is. I had an embarrassing situation play out this afternoon because I was out doing stuff around the lawn and outside the house, and then I started kind of working on my swing a little bit. Like, you know how you just do kind of... You're doing air swings, and I didn't notice, like, one of the neighbors was watching, and it was the head popped up, and then, hey, how are you? And I realized they've probably been watching me work on my swing for...
Dude, my dad did that his whole life. After dinner, he'd grab his driver out of the garage and go in the backyard and just take driver swings with no ball, nothing like that. And I would look at him saying, what is this guy doing? But you just...
Got to do it, man.
You just get to an age, I do the same thing now.
Yeah.
I just swing the driver with nothing.
Just out for a swing, man. I'm going out for a swing. And it really is a beautiful day. It's borderline patio weather if you're going to the Leaf game tonight. And it's a big one, Leafs Bruins. You've got an original tilt tonight, original 6 tilt tonight. They play the Bruins on Thursday, the Habs on Saturday. You have the Rangers on Saturday. And I really feel like that game on Saturday night was everything that makes the sport great. Like, it was 2 original 6 teams, 2 really good teams, 2 teams going to the playoffs, hits, fights, lead changes, overtime. It had everything.
It was an NHL hockey game.
There was awesome game.
There was some animosity, good plays. It was. I looked at it. I even tweeted out, I'm like, the NHL is back. There was a heavyweight tilt, and man,
that fight was a great fight. That's. You know, everyone's got a different view on what gets people up in the stadiums, and obviously goals being scored, the playoffs, the natural energy that comes with it. But the energy that courses through a building when you have a fight or a massive fight that's been anticipated, like that had like Probert Domi vibes on Saturday.
It did. And every fan knew exactly when those 2 guys are on the ice, and that's not always the case when fourth-line players are on the ice.
That kid's a mutant.
He's a big boy, and listen, I'm glad Lyubushkin is healthy and is likely playing tonight, so we can put to bed the idea that was a suspendable hit. Right. It wasn't. It could have. I think it probably should have been a 2-minute charge for sure. I think you could have given him a 2-minute charging penalty, absolutely. But charging penalties are always subjective. But he hits him in the shoulder, and his head follows through and hits the board, and that's what caused the injury. But that had, like, Lindros vibes, that hit. Like, that was freight train, he's coming, look out. And that kid's done that twice in a week.
He did it to the kid in Philly, wasn't
Bastion.
it?
Well, he did it to the kid in Jersey.
Jersey, yeah. Bastion, yeah. Man, oh man, like, the thing is he's only 21, so as he gets to know the league a little bit more, like, he might become a better player as far as a 10, 12-minute player type of thing, like, depending on, because he's still not playing a ton there. He knows his role, but he can skate, actually. That's the one thing. Like, he can move for a big guy. Again, it's weird to see such a big guy being able to move like that. Yeah. Like,
and I talked about Reaves and earning his keep. It sucks when you're on a team and that guy's running around doing that stuff and you're sitting there on the bench saying, well, I know I can't handle that or deal with that, but it's good to know that somebody on your team can. Mm-hmm. Because there's this resurgence of like, oh, do we got to get a tough guy now, or is the tough guy back in? They got somebody to stand up and handle that. It makes everybody feel better about the scenario where some guy's just not going to run around and do it all night long. He got Lyubushkin, but it's like Reaves is going to handle it. That's
exactly.
a comforting feeling.
And that is the difference between having, guys of the past that they had that would fight. Like Wayne Simmons was a guy they picked up a few years ago, and Wayne is as tough as they come and will fight anybody, but he couldn't be expected to fight. Exactly. But also just, you couldn't be like, that guy's not fighting Rempe. That guy's not fighting, like Reaves will and can literally fight anybody. Right. Anybody. And I think a lot of the response from Rempe is, like, you go back to that fight against Delorier, I think that was in response, even though it didn't happen to his team, is Delorier looked at what Rempe did in Jersey, where he threw that massive hit on Bastion, and I think Delorier basically said, I'm going to get out in front of this. Like, if you're going to run around like that and hit like that, I'm going to have a word with you early. And then Olivier did it in Columbus. I think Reaves would have been willing to do it early on Saturday night. Rempe didn't decide to accept it, which is his right. But I actually have a great appreciation for Rempe that he threw that hit and he realized, okay, I knocked him out and Reaves is going to come knocking and I'm going to accept it. Like, I'm going to accept a tilt against a guy who has been a heavyweight for a long time. And he understood, again, this gets back into the unwritten code and all that. It's not a world that any of us ever lived in terms of being that tough. But it's like, if I'm going to really establish myself in the league, it's one thing to go off the draw with 2 minutes into the game. It's another late in a tight game when I knocked a guy out and say, I'll accept that, and then stand up for myself, which he did. It was a good fight, but Rempe did not lose that by any means. I thought it was a draw. Thought it was a good tilt. Here's Chris Johnston, our TSN hockey insider, joining us here on the Maple Toyota Hotline. I don't know if you were down there on Saturday, CJ, but if you weren't, I mean, where does that game rank for you in terms of pure entertainment value?
I mean, certainly one of the better ones, from the Leafs end of things this season, I would think. And I wasn't in the building. I did watch it on television, and I found it really entertaining. I mean, look, you got two of the better teams in the Eastern Conference, two of the hottest teams in the entire league in terms of the current form they've been in, and they went at each other. I thought the Leafs, probably could have pulled that one out even in regulation. I thought they had a slightly better edge of the play, but it's hard not to imagine what maybe you would get if if things conspire, if they play in the playoffs. It would probably be in a further round than the first round. But two teams, I think, with the cities, the fan bases, the histories that they have, I'd certainly welcome that in a best of seven.
Well, yeah, exactly. At this point, it would have to be in a conference final, obviously, unless the Leafs were to drop back to a wild card spot. But, we were talking about Rempe and Reaves and, the Lyubushkin situation in general. Like, after the game, Keefe obviously wasn't happy, and he said Lyubushkin, he had been knocked out of the game. But now it sounds like he's going to play tonight. Like, how did it go from head injury, out of the game, knocked out, to actually 2 nights later he's likely to play?
Good question. I don't have full visibility into that, but I think that, clearly he's been feeling okay. He hasn't shown symptoms since then. And, you wonder after the game, he obviously was knocked out of the game. That part's indisputable. But, in the emotion of it all, Sheldon and I think the Leafs broadly weren't happy with that hit. Feeling that he came a long way across the ice. Obviously, looked like he left his feet while delivering the hit. And you got a new player who's injured. But, the good news is that doesn't seem like it's too serious for Lyubushkin. And, this is getting to... I can't think of anything quite like this Rempe situation, honestly. I mean, I think the average hockey fan, NHL fan, would have known who this guy was 3 weeks ago. And, just how quickly he's made a name for himself, that's something I can't really think of a comparable in recent years in the league. I mean, he's really, while playing very few minutes and still having not played 10 NHL games, he's really, made a strong statement about his spot in the league, and obviously he's still battling for a spot in the Rangers lineup on a team that's probably going to be adding here as we get into the trade deadline.
That's where I was going to go. Who do you think, and maybe given since the games over the weekend maybe have solidified some teams' pathway, who do you think is going to be the most active leading up to the deadline, or maybe is there a team or two that you would circle, say, didn't expect that from them, and now they're going to be players?
For what it's worth, to your previous question, they just got a text that it was a protocol reason that Lyubushkin was taken out of that game. The concussion spotters, and so obviously in his case, it was nothing too serious. As it turns out, with who's going to be active, I mean, I look at the best teams in the league, and a number of them still haven't really added anything just yet. A team like Edmonton, Colorado, Vegas, the Rangers, all these teams I think are going to be fairly active this week. It's not clear to me if the team in town tonight to face the Leafs, the Bruins, is going to be able to get in on the action the way they have in some recent years, just because they're a little lower on the draft pick capital and aren't in possession of a ton of cap space. So I think for them it might inquire having to trade a player off the roster in order to create space to bring someone on, which is a lot to ask, as we get this close to the deadline. But I do think that the teams that we should be eyeing are the ones I mentioned. I mean, Tampa's always lurking in the weeds too, and with Mikhail Sergachev's injury, Julian Brisebois does have cap space, at least for a rental player. He doesn't have a lot of draft picks because he's been pretty aggressive at the last number of deadlines. So I think, what I'd almost call the familiar teams we're used to buying are going to be the ones that are driving it from a buyer's end of things. And, it was clear with Lyubushkin's trade, where his contract's passed through New Jersey with half retained. I mean, the Leafs are trying to carve out as much cap space as they have. And, I would expect that they're, going to try to make at least one more move, if not two.
Well, we had a heated discussion on that last hour, CJ.
All in.
Trying to define all in. Yes, that is the phrase that's being thrown around, is the Leafs, have got to be all in. You got to be all in. And I'm trying to figure out what that looks like. Like how the Leafs would define that. I'm curious if you have an answer on if the Leafs have the stomach for all in, and if they do, what does that look like in terms of players they're trying to acquire and assets and players they're willing to give up?
Yeah, I think all in's kind of like a media discussion that we have, maybe a fan discussion. All in this case, I think for the Leafs side of things, you're looking for specific elements. I think that they'd like another player who can play on the right side of the blue line. Probably someone with a little bit of teeth too. Sort of in the style of a Lyubushkin, even just for the depth, right? I mean, to play a long time in the spring, you usually need 8 or 9 deep to get through that kind of grind, and so that makes sense. I mean, maybe a depth forward who can bring some defensive chops. I mean, it's something they don't necessarily have in big supply among their forward group. Obviously, a lot of talented offensive players, but probably missing a few elements if you're trying to give Sheldon Keefe and his coaching staff the best available grouping of players that can be moved around. And so I don't see it being an all in like they're trading for a top line winger and a first pair of defensemen necessarily. I think it's more about just augmenting the group. And let's face it, you enter the season with a team like the Leafs have. I mean, you're probably winning or losing predominantly on how the top paid guys perform when the games matter most. Are they able to break through and produce offense and tilt the ice in those nights? And then some of it's going to come down to the goaltending. And I don't have any reason to believe the Leafs are out there looking to add another goalie, but they got to try to find a solution among the 3 they currently have on the NHL roster. And so, I think all in is looking at the various options. It's looking at, can they maybe make a trade for someone who isn't on an expiring deal? Does something like that make sense? But I don't suspect anything seismic's going to happen or a huge headline-grabbing move. I think it's more about tinkering around the edges of the roster and just giving themselves the best chance to withstand injury and whatever comes along the way here.
CJ, who else, like right-handed shot type of defensemen or players, do you think might be of interest?
Well, it sounds like everybody. I mean, this is the hard thing about trying to follow a Brad Treliving team is he's known for being, really working the marketplace and having an understanding what's available. I've heard there's some interest in Zach Bogosian. He's a player that obviously was in Toronto before during those COVID years, spent a season with the Maple Leafs. Minnesota's actually hoping to re-sign him, but, maybe there's a world where he makes sense. As I mentioned, I think last week when I was on the show, I've heard they've inquired on Matt Dumba. There's been some talk that maybe the Leafs have at least a little bit of time for, someone like David Savard out of Montreal, who's, defensive defenseman. He's under contract for another year. So, I don't know if they end up opting in that direction, but, there's only so many, specific options out there that I think could be fit in cap-wise that could, fill a spot on the right side of their blue line. And those are among some of the names that are out there. And, what's interesting is I haven't been able to get much of a beat on what they're looking at forward. I think that, they certainly wouldn't mind adding another depth piece down the forward lineup, but, haven't really heard much in terms of specific names there.
So we're talking about teams that are adding. Pitt, it just seems like they had that one game or the 2 games back-to-back where it's like game over. Like, what happens there? Does Sid, does he want to just say, I want to spend the last 3 or 4 years of my career and rebuild this thing? Or how do you think things play out there?
I think he's going to have to make a choice at some point. I mean, not in season here. I mean, obviously he's all in on trying to do whatever he can, even against whatever the small odds are that they can make the playoffs to keep, holding up his end of the bargain, giving the team a chance to play there. But, let's face it, there's going to have to be a certain degree of soul searching once they get through the next few days and then ultimately the next 6 weeks and what, really doesn't look like they're going to be in the playoffs for the second straight year and, figure out where they go directly as an organization. Crosby's got one more year in his deal after this one. And so, he's got an opportunity potentially to sign an extension there. I mean, he's just such a loyal guy. And when you think about it, he's never been on a team since his rookie year that's been a seller. I mean, even last year they missed the playoffs, but they played down to the last game of the year with a chance to get in. And so it wasn't the same circumstances that he's going to face now where, Jake Gensel, we expect to be dealt by Friday, but potentially a couple others. And they're going to be kind of playing out down the stretch. There's not going to be stakes on the games they're playing. And, he's had such a great year at age 36. I don't know where it goes. I mean, my heart or my brain sort of suggests that it's unlikely that he's the sort of guy that's going to want to go play somewhere else, but it is a pretty bleak set of choices. I mean, I'm not sure what he could see on the table or what management could do between now and July to make him think next year is going to be all that much better. They're pretty locked in with a lot of contracts. They obviously have a pretty old team, and all those players are getting a year on. I don't know what sort of rabbit could be pulled out of a hat that we're looking at the Penguins significantly differently entering next season from where they are today. And so that's a tough choice. It's a situation a lot of players find themselves in. I mean, Patrick Kane and John and Taves played several years in Chicago where they weren't a playoff team, hoping that they'd be around when the organization was ready to win again. That didn't work out. Way back when, I think Henrik Lundqvist was in a certain similar spot in New York. And, finally the Rangers now, of course, are one of the league's best teams again and have a chance to win a cup, but it's beyond his playing window. I mean, it's tough for these organizations to turn things over in a short window of time. And so I don't know where Crosby will land on that. I really don't think that those conversations happen until April, May, June. But yeah, I mean, the reality is perhaps his last number of years will be spent on the team out of the playoffs because I don't see an easy or quick fix for the Penguins.
No, that's the tough reality is that there's a very good chance that organization, you mentioned Taves and Kane, that was 6 years ago. They were waiting for it to turn around. And Chicago's still the worst team in the league. Like there's a reckoning coming in Pittsburgh. It's the natural, cycle of sports. And they've had an unbelievable run. Unbelievable. But it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And I've been beating this drum now for weeks, but the idea of Sid and it's his call, it's his career, and there's a lot of class that comes with him just saying, I'm a Pittsburgh guy, I'm going to stay in Pittsburgh, I'm going to live here the rest of my life, and if that's his decision, so be it. He's not getting traded between now and Friday, clearly, but this summer, I'd like to believe there's some soul searching for his sake, but also the sake of the game. Like the idea of Sid going somewhere else for 2 or 3 years, picking his spot, going somewhere else, playing, would just be incredible theater, incredible content, and it'd just be, I think, a great way to cap off what's been one of the 5 greatest careers of all time. The idea of him going somewhere else, but it's on him. Like it's completely on him. And at this rate, it doesn't seem like he's interested in moving. I think a lot of that though is kind of forced ignorance. He doesn't want to believe it. You saw his comments last night, CJ. He doesn't want to entertain the idea that they're even sellers by Friday, but he knows. He knows what they've got, and he knows where they're going.
Exactly. And I don't know where he's going to come on that. Again, he doesn't feel like the sort of guy to do it, but I'm with you, Hayes. I mean, if he went somewhere, did something, that would be one of the stories of the year entering next season. Because obviously, if he's in a spot where he's willing to move on, he's going to a team with a chance to win. And so, I think that I'm with you. I hope he gets there too, just for the good of the game. I mean, we don't need, even this year, with how well he's played at his age 36 season. It's just hard to imagine that they're this far away. I mean, there's nothing more he can be giving, and so the fact he's not in the playoffs is likely not going to get there is a shame. And we'll just have to see where he lands. He's such a loyal guy. He said it so many times he's finishing his career in Pittsburgh, but I think he's got a lot left in the tank, and it'd be pretty compelling if he was playing somewhere else. And look how many guys did, right? Gretzky was in multiple places. I mean, Gordie Howe played multiple places. If you want to go way back, obviously Yager. I mean, a lot of guys occupying the same kind of space historically as him have played in multiple cities. And I don't think it's, of course, tainted their legacies in any way.
No, not in the least. Exactly. I mean, you look at Mark Messier, different story, and he was earlier in his career, younger, but he goes to New York, does what he does in New York. The idea of Sid doing that for a team that hasn't won a cup in a long time could be very compelling. Very compelling. We got some breaking news here. Breaking news.
Yeah.
Lindy Ruff has been fired in New Jersey. Travis Green will take over as the interim head coach.
Show me a team with a goaltending problem. I'll show you a coach that's going to get fired. They haven't had a save all year long, and what the hell is he supposed to do with that?
Yeah, honestly.
What do you make of it, CJ?
Honestly, I'm surprised it took so long. Not because I'm necessarily blaming Lindy Ruff, but it's just been clear the Devils season has been going in the wrong direction, for a while now, and based on where they sit after this road trip through California, it's hard for me to see them making a pullback into the playoff race. So, with Travis Green having been on the bench as the associate coach all year, I think that there's kind of an understanding that he's there for this exact reason, that if they got to a point where he would step in and take over the team, I think Travis Green's going to be a good head coach in the game again. It'll be better for the experience he had in Vancouver. And so they got to the place I would have thought. It took them a little bit longer. So than I would have thought. And so I don't know if they're calling Green the interim coach for now. I think he's got a chance to be a longer-term coach there. And it's been a disappointing season in New Jersey, and we'll see if they can maybe salvage something. But the clock is not on their side with how big of a gap they have in the standings.
No, go ahead, Noodles.
I was going to say, maybe Tommy Fitzgerald, it's the new coach bump, but, that team is clearly missing, something there. Obviously, the injury to Dougie Hamilton hasn't helped.
Top 50 Dougie.
Top 50
Top
Dougie.
50 Dougie all day.
Exactly. But, if they don't get a save and it's clear, you hear that New Jersey's been kind of all in trying to get either Markstrom or other. I think UC Saros would probably be off the market, CJ. I've heard his name a few times. Is there some weird names out there that you'd be surprised on teams that are either in a playoff spot or close to it that are sellers or that are still shopping maybe one of their top tier players?
Yeah, I think it's getting a little more clarity now. I mean, UC Saros certainly was out there. Nashville's obviously gone on a big heater here with 8 wins in a row and roared into playoff contention. So I don't think that that's something that would still be considered unless someone really knocked their socks off. I think, the Devils have been looking around goaltending all season long. I know they've checked in on Jake Allen at various points, obviously made a real strong pitch for Markstrom. I've heard them even discussed as maybe like a Linus Ullmark kind of situation if Boston ever were to consider trading him. So, I do think the Devils have scoured the marketplace and had a chance at least to get Markstrom, and I think, are going to look at doing that again, even if they don't get something done by Friday there. But, it's hard for me not to just go sort by, team save percentage this year and see Ottawa in 32nd and New Jersey in 31st and conclude as to why the Devils are where they are. I mean, they've had a tough season with the injuries, as you mentioned, but, they haven't got enough saves. What's pretty crazy from a Leafs perspective is Tampa Bay's in 30th in team save percentage. Andrei Vasilevsky really has not performed well since coming back from his health issues to start the season. And, that's probably the biggest reason the Lightning aren't in a more secure place right now in the playoff race too.
It's going to be a fun week, CJ. Enjoy it, buddy. We'll do it again, I'm sure, later in the week. Thank you for this.
All right. Sounds good, guys. Take care.
Chris Johnston, our TSN Hockey Insider, joining us here on the Maple Toyota Hotline. Check out Maple Toyota's huge truck and SUV lineup, including Tundra, 4Runner, Highlander, and Grand Highlander in stock and ready to deliver. Visit mapletoyota.com. So Fire Lindy chants have been going on for a year and a half, and I guess the fans, got what they were hoping for, but I agree. I mean, the goaltending's been terrible. They had some weird games over the week, like Jack Hughes with that penalty shot with 2 seconds left in Anaheim, I think it was. That one stings, and they get blown out last night. I believe they did.
Yeah, by LA 5-1.
By LA beat them 5-1. That's right.
Yeah.
So Lindy's out. Travis Green, friend of the show, Greeny steps in on the interim, but that's a lot of coaches that have been fired in the last 12, 18 months.
Now, I thought it was you're right, the last 12 months or maybe 14 months. That would be coach number 14, I believe.
Oh, man.
GM's
Correct me
trying to
if I'm
save
wrong.
their ass for putting nonsense out in the ice and saying, there you go, you guys better be good. And there's holes. And think about Jersey not getting those guys a goalie. Like, that's insane.
Yeah.
You knew it from the beginning of the year they had to put a goalie in there. From the playoffs the year before. You couldn't go into the season without a stud goalie, and they didn't do it. I don't know what options were out there, but you can't win in the league with that goaltending. And I get it, top 50, Dougie wasn't playing, different pieces, injuries, Jack Hughes, but you want to go to war. Like, other teams make it work when good players are injured because they got a goalie.
Well, it's a very good point. I mean, when you think of the struggles this year, like certain coaches that have been fired, top of mind, Lindy, Ruff, now Jersey, goaltending's been an issue.
LA Kings,
goaltending. Ottawa. Korpisalo has been a disaster. Absolute disaster.
I think what you're doing here is developing a trend.
There is a trend ongoing here, yes. Edmonton, Skinner, and Campbell was in the American League when they fired their head coach, right?
Yep.
It's,
I mean, that's the thing. Like, No, I mean, look at it. Look at the coaches Minnesota wasn't. That was Dean Evison got let go there. Like, there's been lots of
St. Louis.
Yeah, I mean, overall, it speaks back to this is a high pressure league, and it's all about what have you done for me lately. Mm-hmm. And if you haven't, there's a lot of noise, and easier to fire the coach than fire a bunch of players that have no move contracts and security and all of that type of stuff.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like, I'm looking at it right now. Like, if you just look at, let's say, the top 10, 12 teams in the league over the last couple of years, Florida's had a new coach, Paul Maurice 2 years ago. Vancouver's had a new coach last year. New York, the Rangers, new coach, Laviolette. Boston, new coach. This is Montgomery's second year. Jets, new coach. Bonus is second year, I believe. Dallas, new coach, right? It's been 2 years now for DeBoer. Colorado and Toronto, old coaches. Carolina, old coaches. Edmonton, new coach. Vegas, a new coach last year. LA's got a new coach. Like, there's two teams, Toronto and Carolina.
It also talks about the modern day players, where I hear from a lot of people involved in the game where guys will come back to the bench and try to explain something, and they're just like, yeah, thanks, got it. It's like they just do whatever they do. And
I'm glad you brought that up. I want to come back and get into what happened on Saturday with Nylander in particular. But that line, what Keefe said after the game, but also Keefe addressed it again today. Why Sheldon decided to bench them. He benched them on Saturday night. We'll get into that, what he's trying to achieve with that. Leafs Bruins tonight. Scotty Barnes injury. Josh Donaldson is retiring. We'll get into that. Russell Wilson has been cut or will be cut by the Denver Broncos. Manoah's missing starts. Gosman's missing starts. There's a lot going on. It's beautiful weather outside. People are golfing in the Toronto area, certainly down in the Sunbelt in Windsor. Every course is open.
I told you that was a hot pocket.
It's a hot pocket. It's a hot pocket.
Are people teeing it there today?
Yes. I've had a number of people send me. I think Olynyk and Kolyakovo are playing golf right now. I don't know where they are.
At a goat track. They're at a goat track. They're being heroes. That's what it is.
It did look heroic. You're right. Yeah, it was heroic.
Because if you're out golfing today, it's just saying like
it's too much.
We get it's a little bit over the top.
But it's a little bit over the top.
Yeah.
But I believe they are, and they're posting about it, so they're very excited.
Well, good for them.
I'm jealous. I'm not going to lie to you. All right, OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 4. All right, Jason Strudwick in about a half an hour. Struddy will join us, get his take on Rempe versus Reaves on Saturday night. Leafs Bruins tonight. The Oilers with a big win last night. Zach Hyman again with 2 goals. He's up to 42 on the season. It feels like 50's a lock. If he's healthy, 50's a lock. And McDavid is in hot pursuit of that Art Ross. He's right behind Kucherov and McKinnon. He's got games in hand on both. It's going to be a great stretch run, I think, for records, for awards, for playoff spots.
I called that, by the way, McDavid, and you guys were like, he's too far gone now.
I
just want to clarify.
Well, it's not over yet. I mean, he hasn't passed anybody yet.
No, I'm just saying, but like in November and December, I said, don't ever count him out. He'll be right there at the end. And you Hayes, specifically, Noodles, I don't know.
Me in particular.
Hayes, at least admit you said it. You were like, he's too far gone now. And I said, it's McDavid, it's McJesus, and don't ever count him out.
Is this the retribution show? We're 90 minutes in, and Hayes has already put up his hand saying, I called it on Sid, you know, and then I called it on McDavid. So in the next hour, I've got to have something.
We take a lot of heat. We gotta feel good about some of our takes.
Every once in a while, you got to pump your own tires, right? They get deflated a lot. A lot of people are stabbing.
Who else will if we don't pump our own tires?
Right? Nobody will. Nobody.
I love it.
Our cars get keyed all the time, and our tires get pierced.
So, lit on fire, light the whole thing. Like sometimes we got to jack up those tires.
Listen, it looks like it's trending in that direction. I'm not going to deny that, but it's not over yet. I mean, Kucherov's still got an 8-point lead on him, and McKinnon's got a 4-point lead. Like, 8 points is substantial. Kucherov's not going to stop. Like, that guy is still going to put up numbers, man. He's very likely going to get to 140. So, you know, you do the math, as our boy might say. Do the math. You got to figure out how McDavid's going to get there. You know, I'm not going to bet against him. I understand what you're saying. He's been great. Racking up points. They're winning games. Edmonton looks good. I was thinking about this actually last night watching that. Like, I think different portions of the season, we've all had different views on the 4 Canadian teams that are going to the playoffs. Leafs, Edmonton, Winnipeg, and Vancouver. And I think for a good portion of the season, especially early on, like coming into the year, it was 2 locks. Toronto and Edmonton. Locks going to the playoffs. They have been the locks for the better part of 3 or 4 years. They've got the best players. They've got, you know, this all-in mentality during the summer at the deadline, et cetera, and they feel like they're close and they're knocking on it. And then Vancouver came out guns blazing. Winnipeg's been great all year. And it felt like kind of Vancouver, Winnipeg almost overtook those 2 teams in terms of the Canadian favorites. And I think it swung back the other way. Like if I offered you Edmonton, Toronto versus Winnipeg, Vancouver, which twosome would you take to give you the best chance of winning a Stanley Cup?
The best twosome?
I don't know. I mean, if you had to take 2 and go that
well,
those
it's,
two,
as
like
I just said, Winnipeg,
yeah.
Vancouver versus Edmonton, Toronto. Which one would you take?
Man, you almost got me, Hazy. You got me thinking.
Yeah. I mean, man, that's close.
For me, it's Toronto, Edmonton. I don't think it's that close. I think the way that those 2 teams are playing right now, like Edmonton looks really good, man. Like they look good.
You know why I'll take the same thing is because I think you always have a better chance with the 2 best players. And those are the 2 best players, McDavid and Matthews. And I think if everything elevated and all things were equal, like it's just I would take the 2 best players to always have it. It hasn't materialized because nobody's won squat. But if I anytime I have something like this, I always just revert back like, what guy could possibly strap the team on their back, and who's the best player? And that's what I always defer to.
Unless it's Hellebuck.
Yeah, I should say it's not like defined 100%.
You're going to get your car blown up.
If keep in mind, if you go points percentage, Winnipeg is second in the league.
They've been so good, Noodles.
And,
I hear what you're saying.
They're scoring now too. Like, do you see they're actually like
Noodles,
scoring?
he turns a blind eye to success. That's what he does.
That
is what you do. That is a good way to sum it up. You turn a blind eye to success. It's a new phrase on our show.
No, you know what?
And that's why you get your car keyed.
It's a great debate because you can make a case for all 4 teams. Now, you know, Vancouver, this has been their dip because they hadn't dipped all season long.
Right.
So now everyone is the shine coming off Vancouver a little bit because they actually look human.
New segment. Every time Hazy has one of his takes,
you got to pick one or the other, though.
Turn a blind eye or truth.
Or you could say, I threw, what do they call it, a monocle? What's that little?
The monocle.
And I threw that on, and I'm looking at Edmonton and Toronto right now. Like, it doesn't have to be a negative. It's a positive. I like the way Edmonton and Toronto are playing right now, and I'm just saying it's swinging
very well.
It's swinging.
There's nothing wrong with that. It's good to have a 4-pack that actually looks really good. Now, I'd like to say, call me in a week because I'd like to see what they do at the deadline because the deadline I think will help some of these teams. Like you keep hearing that Vancouver, Jimmy Rutherford still sniffing on players like top tier players. I heard that he's in on Gensel. If he gets a Jake Gensel, that team looks a lot different. We haven't even talked about the Pettersson deal. I think that's an unbelievable deal.
I think it's a good deal. Yeah, 8 years, $11.6 million, I think it was per year.
$100,000 more than Nylander. Like that's really what he might have gone cheaper, but he said the guy in Toronto got more, and I'm better than him. That's probably what he told to his agent.
I'm sure that's what he said. I'm sure that it sounds like the Nylander deal, which again speaks to Toronto. Everything's about Toronto all the time.
Right.
Is that his deal kind of set a standard? And Pettersson's younger. Pettersson plays up the middle of the ice.
Right.
Pettersson's had better numbers, the last couple of years. Willie's been pulling his weight. Pulling his weight, but I think that's reasonable that Pettersson would ask for that. And I think Vancouver probably said, "We'll give you how about $100,000 more? Will you take it?" And he took it. And that's, I think, a pretty good deal for both sides.
I thought it was something. Honestly, I thought it was going to be higher.
I thought so too.
I thought it was going to be 12 every day of the year, every day of the week. I think it's a good deal for both sides. Yeah. And considering how noisy it was a week ago about you know what I mean? Like there was no talks about this.
It happened quickly. It was like it got out.
All it took was those for that reporting, and then all of a sudden it was done in a week.
Right. You're going to
Carolina. Somebody was a
mastermind
saying, "Hey, do you mind maybe floating that out, and then we could expedite the process?"
Well,
and then it was done.
Like Jim Rutherford was in Carolina for a long time, and it's almost like I'm going to use the threat of Carolina because I know what that threat actually means. Like I know what that means because I just found maybe it's a coincidence, but Carolina's the only team that was calling on him. No one else would call on Elias Pettersson. Really?
Dude, that's one of those ones where you don't know what the hell the truth is.
True.
Elias Pettersson, if anyone with half a brain is doing their job properly and understand he's available, everyone has to call on
Exactly.
him.
Right. So why only is Carolina the one that's
the
public?
mystery. That's where it's like, what is that?
Yeah, exactly.
So Waddell was the only guy that got sniffed that out.
He's the only guy that could connect with Jimmy because they go back or something. Right. I don't know, but I you know what? I still need to answer your original question, Hayes, because it was good, and I kind of took it off the rails. Apologize. I do see what you're saying. Like you could make the argument that Edmonton and Toronto right now, with the way you look at them through the lens, the monocle, that they may have, kind of passed them or leapfrog. But the other two are pretty damn good teams, man. You can't sleep on them.
No, I'm not. And I think it's a good thing, again, for, Canadian hockey in the spring, the idea that you got 4 tickets, and I think at least one team, if not multiple teams, will go on a run here. And, it won't count as a trade deadline move, but that Sean Monahan pickup has been huge for Winnipeg. He's been really good. And, Lindholm, though, the shine's off him in Vancouver. They're not ecstatic with what he's bringing to the table all of a sudden because they're losing. He's not supplying much offense. And now Lindholm's kind of on the firing line, so to speak. But, we mentioned Willie. I want to play this clip. Sheldon Keefe, who sat him the other night. And, when it's always Willie. It does seem like it's always Nylander in particular or his line that is, talk about a monocle, like Keefe is really focused on your details. And he sat him. When Willie returned, he played well, scored a big goal. Here's what Keefe had to say about it earlier today.
We're increasing the accountability for all of our players in these situations. Each situation is different. Each mistake is different. Some are well intentioned, and the play doesn't execute the way you want it to, and something goes wrong. In some cases, it's purposely stepping outside of the structure and the system, and that's to me what it was the other night. To me, that's different than a lot of other situations.
Maybe
really?
It's as simple as, and don't say that. I don't want to turn this into a big deal, but don't say everyone is held to a different standard, because Mitch Marner can go out there and make an asinine play where it's like, what on earth was he thinking there, whether it be on the power play or 5-on-5. And I'm not trying to talk.
But that's the direct connection.
But maybe it's just as simple as this. Sheldon Keefe understands that William Nylander responds to this because he's just one of those guys that's like, you know what? He needs a little butt kick here and there, and it's like you're going to sit your ass down on the bench and don't even think about doing that again. And he went out and scored a goal. And maybe he understands that other guys wouldn't respond. I had a different set of rules from other players. I had my big boy pants on, and I had some discussions with coaches that other players wouldn't have. Because if some people can take criticism or sitting on the bench, and it pisses them off and fires them up, and they want to go out there and do better. So maybe the coach, it's as simple as this. The coach understands that that's the way he deals with William Nylander. I don't know really how else to describe it.
It is true, though. You play with guys, and some guys, and I say this respectfully, some guys need a pat on the back, some guys need a kick in the ass. Not literally, but just to, verbally, like, hey, I need more from you, or accountability. The other thing, too, is I don't mind that the coach says, like, we're trying to establish a pattern of behavior here, a pattern, and everyone has to buy in. Just because you've had a great season, yes, you're going to get a longer leash. You might get in trouble, but you're going to be right back out there. You're going to push.
But the one thing for Nylander, Jamie, is when he sees an Austin Matthews or Mitch Marner make a ridiculous play that ends up in the back of their net, he would want to look back and say, well, what about that one? Yeah. That's where the problem lies.
That seems very reasonable. I mean, again, there were isolated moments the other night. There was a back check late where Matthews was dogging the back check. Like the video, it went viral. It was Fox, I think the Fox goal, I believe. Or I can't remember the exact detail, but he's blatantly
might have been the Fox play to Panarin, maybe in overtime.
His man, and he's just floating back. And even Mitch with the empty net, he had space. He could have skated that into the neutral zone. He could have killed the clock. He tried to end it. I understand the statistics and maybe it makes sense to do that, but it cost them. Like literally 5 seconds later, it's in the back of the net.
Right.
Mitch isn't missing any shifts. Austin's not missing anything. It's always Willie. But Willie also knew that when he signed for 8 years. And this is, it's like they know how to operate with Willie. Sheldon's known him for a long time. And I agree with your assessment. I think it's about he can push. And I think they're more worried about him defensively, and I think they should be. Mitch Marner is generally a very good defensive player. Austin Matthews is as well. Willie, if he's going to be out there with Domi and Bertuzzi, they need to be on the right side of the puck in big moments.
He's been unbelievable this year, and I think there would only be one thing that would worry them. It's like, are you going to pull this stunt in a big game in the playoffs?
Right.
Are you going to pull a Galchenyuk? Are you going to pull a Travis Dermott where you're just doing something goofy in overtime or something? And are you going to take it that far where it's playoff hockey and you're needed and counted on, and are you going to do something stupid? Big forecheck, are you going to bail? That would be the only concern that would be floating around in someone's headspace about the future. But you're just hoping that these kind of little butt kicks is like, just don't do that because you're so good when you're on. When you're intense and you're physical and on it and skating, there's not a lot of guys in the league better than him. So it's like, just do that on a consistent basis. And the spinny stuff and the floating around, that's for the offensive zone, not in your own zone. Mm-hmm. And if he puts that all together, it's a real dangerous player. Real dangerous.
I think ultimately, though, there should be a standard for everybody. And there might be, here or there guys who get longer leashes. I'm sure Willie has earned a longer leash with his play. But there has to be a level of consistency in that room. And you've seen it. Let's not lose sight. John Tavares making $11 million. We're going to push you down. We're going to push you down in the lineup. We think it's best for the organization. We think it's best for our group right now in our depth. And, those are probably tough conversations to have. Yeah. But you have to do it now. And there has to be a level of accountability.
Any coach noodles can handle working mistakes. Like if you're working your ass off and a Sidney Crosby or McDavid does a little tight turn in the corner and he just beats it to the net, those things happen. But those 747 turns in the neutral zone, there was one in Arizona a couple weeks ago on the penalty kill that cost them.
Yes.
And that one ended up in the back of the net. So it's like, those are not working mistakes. Those are stupidity and laziness, a combo of both on each particular one.
Right. Leafs Bruins tonight. We got a lot of news coming in here. We've got a Raptors signing. We'll tell you about that. There was a firing in the NHL today. We'll get back into that. Struddy coming up. Steve Phillips on What's Up with the Jays. Leafs Bruins tonight. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050 and on the TSN app. All right, so the Raptors coming off a win last night. They've got real injury issues. Scotty Barnes could be done for the year with the fracture in his hand. And, Brown's been injured. Pirtle's been injured. But they have signed Kelly Olynyk to an extension, a 2-year extension, $26.25 million, I believe, is the deal. And he's a Canadian guy, local guy. They acquired him from Utah. This was the belief they'd find a way to keep him around. They feel like he fits in pretty well to their system. They want veterans, which is smart. We talk about it in sports all the time. They're a young team. They're a growing team. They're likely not going to be a competitive team over the next couple of years, but you want to set a standard, and you want guys that you can rely on. And Kelly Olynyk, by all accounts, a really good pro, good guy. He gets a 2-year extension. So there you go.
There's going to be a lot of those type deals coming up for this team. 2-year deals, blah, blah, blah. Noodles talks about it. Like when you're in this transition, there's guys coming in and out the door. It's a revolving door, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got to help these kids grow, right? And you're going to bring in veteran guys and not on long-term deals. Got to have some flexibility, but try and help the growth of the group. And unfortunately, the Barnes injury, is it curtains for the season? I don't
Probably.
think so.
I mean, they're still in the running for that 10 seed. Even Chicago at 9 is not completely gone, but they got to jump the nets. They got to obviously chase down Atlanta. It puts them in a very difficult spot, really tough spot, because that's their best player. Scotty's been great. They feel like they're moving in the right direction. They've been winning games lately, but it's probably curtains for them. But now you give quickly an opportunity. You Abaji, the other kid you got in the Olynyk deal, you give him more play. You see what you've got. They got young players. They've got lottery tickets here with young guys. They're trying to figure out who's who. And then you get veterans like Olynyk, who knows if he even lasts the full 2 years. But cost certainty, you've got him. Money's locked in. If you trade him in a year or two, you do that. But Kelly Olynyk signing an extension here with the Raptors. So more on that into the final hour. Steve Phillips will join us. Our boy Jason Strudwick coming up as well. Overdrive continues. TSN 1050, soon to be up on TSN 2.